General Manager of the Energy and Refined Fuels business here at DTN. And today we're diving into what's new and what's next in 2026 for the refined fuels industry and digital transformation. And with me, I've got two distinguished guests. They actually make me feel pretty humble in this space because both of them have more experience doing what they're doing than I'll ever have. But instead of me explaining to you who they are and what they do, I'll just let David Olson and Matt Medintz introduce themselves. So David, you want to kick it off?
I can do that. Thanks, Ken. And hello, Matt. So my name's David Olson. I've kind of been in this space for 30 some odd years now, all around innovative technologies in the refined fuel business, really trying to help companies modernize how fuel moves from a refinery all the way to a forecourt or, commercial industrial application. So most of my background is really management consulting around energy technology with I've led firms that are big teams at firms with like IBM and Deloitte and KPMG and Wipro and Oracle, and executive roles at several software companies focused on fuel supply, secondary distribution, and pricing. So over the years, I've worked with all the national oil companies, all the integrated companies, integrated oil companies, lots of wholesalers and lots of retail brands that you're used to seeing on the highway canopies. I started at NASA long ago, building flight systems, but the vast majority of my professional career has been right here chasing the carbon molecule.
Okay. It's great, David. So Matt, what about yourself? What have you been up to?
Well, hi guys. It's a tough one to follow. Talk about the word humble. Well, I'm Matt Medintz. I lead the professional services team here at DTN. And really what that is, it's part of our customer experience organization, which is really committed to ensuring our customers achieve enduring value and success from our solutions. I've spent the bulk of my professional career in helping companies make better decisions faster, both strategically and tactically. And that's across strategy, marketing, sales, pricing, operations, logistics. The list is very long. I don't quite have the number of companies I can spout off that I've worked for like David and made an impact there in that part of my career. But what I did learn there is that I really enjoyed helping companies get to the point where they could make better decisions faster. So after about 15 years, I jumped in and changed course so that I could actually do that. And that's what I do now. For the past decade or so, I've been helping customers actually get to that outcome. Like David, I've worked with a number of companies throughout the refined fuels value chain, helping them transform how they work, leveraging technology to make those better, faster decisions. And that really is all about the intersection of people, process, technology, and data across a pretty complex ecosystem and value chain, which makes it interesting every day.
Well, that's great. And I think we've got that's why it excites me about this conversation, because we've got David will sort of be the bookend of sort of the why and the what maybe. And then Matt, you'll be able to talk about really the how, because you've got that experience, right? And I'll try to stay out of your two way and let you both shine a little bit here. But I think, part of the purpose of today's conversation is because I think all three of us have experienced that the industry's really in the midst of a pretty prolific change at the moment. There's a major shift underway towards smarter and more connected, more automated processes. And we've seen it, three of our experiences gone from sort of that basic process automation. And now we're moving into the age of automating decisions with intelligence from AI. But before I get into that too much, just take a couple minutes for each of you, and I'd like to hear what excites you most about where the industry's headed right now. What are you seeing out there? And maybe David, you kick it off just from what are you doing?
So. What excites me most? So I think the industry's finally getting the tools to operate the way they know it's the way they've probably always wanted it to, and the way they know that it could. And I think you probably nailed those three, really, right? So, I mean, for decades, all the decisions in the refined fuel space is it's tribal knowledge, right? It's phone calls. Every one of these multi-billion-dollar companies operates all this stuff on a spreadsheet. It's just it's history, right? So now we're starting to see real-time data from terminals, carriers, forecourts, all that coming together to feed the operational tactics of schedulers, traders, terminal operators, and so forth, right? So they're all seeing the same picture and they can all act on the same picture. The second thing I think is what that feeds, right? So that's a shift from, reactive firefighting to proactive or even predictive operations. So instead of discovering a problem when a driver is stuck in a rack or when a site is on the verge of a runout or a terminal is on the verge of a runout, we see those risks hours or even days in advance so we can make smarter decisions now. And I think lastly, there's a talent angle here. Younger professionals coming into this industry expect modern tools. Giving them digital, data-driven workflows not only improves the performance of the company and everybody around it, but it also makes this industry a much more attractive place to build a career. And that's going to be a big deal for the next decade.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that, David, right? Even when you and I were together at Sigma, right? You got a lot of new upcoming, leadership and stuff that they're expecting, state-of-the-art tools. So
I've moved from the younger crowd to the older crowd now. Yes.
Yeah, I know. I feel the same way most days, but it is exciting though to see people that sort of ignore the old barriers, right? The stuff that you and I have just sort of many of us have put up with for decades of just saying, hey, I don't need to put up with that any longer, right? I mean, why should I? So
why do we do it that way?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So
new thoughts.
Well, don't let the gray in my beard fool you, but I like to think of myself as holding on to that youthful perspective. And I think you're spot on, guys. Like at the end of the day, I think it's all about the fact that expectations are changing. To me, that's what I'm most excited about is that we're at a point where not only, to your point, David, like the tools are available, but expectations from everybody involved are changing now, that if you're not taking advantage of those tools, you're going to fall behind from a customer experience point of view. You're going to fall back from a commercial point of view. You're going to fall behind from an employee experience and talent acquisition perspective. And it creates a lot of excitement because people are now thinking about what work should look like, not what it does look like. And that's really exciting because it gives us the opportunity to do something interesting with our customers.
Yeah. So David, I know you've been doing this a while, but if you had to pick one thing out for like the next 12 months, right? You got a lot of people be listening to this or finalizing their plans for next year. Is there one thing that just stands out to you that they really ought to be paying attention to?
I think there's three, Ken. Big shifts, right? Which we kind of discussed. So, we're treating the refined fuel space, which is really a series of siloed functions, right? And has been always. And now it's looking more like an end-to-end supply chain that is, not necessarily disconnected from its functions, but the functions are starting to blend together and share things. So supply, scheduling, terminal ops, transportation, retail, everybody, right? That used to all be very optimized locally in functional silos. But in 2026, I think organizations are asking, why are we doing it that way when there's a better way? There's more opportunity for us, and we expect to be able to take advantage of that. And those barriers are coming down, mainly because the technology is coming up, right? There's more that we can do, right? So, being able to see the impact of a supply decision on dispatch or on rack congestion, weather, margin, and on customer experience, right? It should be front and center for us now, and we can make those decisions or have machines show us the potential for a decision and allow us to execute on it. So second, that whole decision support space is getting really sophisticated. We're moving beyond reporting and dashboards. I heard somebody the other day say dashboards are so 1990, and I happen to agree. We're moving to optimization and recommendations, right? I want everybody in this industry has their secret sauce, their best pricing, their least buy, whatever, right? And they're doing it the best they can with the tools that they've got. Well, we're moving beyond that, right? So here's the best combination of everything in the supply chain can be acted on in real time. Terminal, product, carrier capacity, in pulling in allocations and contracts and real-time conditions like weather and traffic and everything else. So while people are still in control, the system's doing the heavy lifting, it's doing the math, and it's doing the decision processing. So third, I'd say the whole ecosystem opens up, right? That's what makes this possible. Instead of trying to build all these monolithic systems, companies are now embracing, APIs and interoperability, right? Terminal systems, carrier platforms, ERPs. There's a connected application portfolio in every one of these companies that, depends on this huge data lake of stuff. And now we're starting to pull all that together. And it allows us to have an openness to see data that we can execute on as something in real time as opposed to something we look at in monthly meetings.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. It's about people not wanting dashboards anymore, because dashboard is sort of that looking in the rearview mirror conversation versus people want, I've heard cockpits and control towers and those type of words. They want to look forward, right, of where things are headed. So, but anyway, Matt, so I know you've been engaged with a couple of pretty large customers and some pretty deep conversations. You came out of a workshop even just last week. So what are customers really asking for right now? So
well, it's really interesting because I think it piggybacks right where you guys left off, which I don't know if you did that on purpose. If you did, bravo. But to me, it's very much about, to be a little colloquial, like eliminating the swivel chair, right? From the executive down to the line level, it's like at the end of the day, people want to stop going from left to right, application to application, spreadsheet to spreadsheet, as David referenced earlier, to figure out what to do and how to do it. And there's operational waste in it. There's context switching. You're moving from the tactical exercise of compiling data to then trying to think about it and get into a strategic mindset. It creates a lot of pressure that doesn't need to be there. And frankly, the whole process of insight to possible actions to decision to taking the action to generating the next result and insight, like you think of it as linear, but it's always on at every stage. And the swivel chair and spreadsheet process does not lend itself to that. So it is very difficult for the person in the seat to live in that space, let alone achieve the best outcome for the business. And so to me, that's the theme that underlies everything. You end up with more points of failure too, because this one spreadsheet didn't come out as it should, and therefore I've now got to go get somebody to work on this thing, and we're going to have our stand up and make decisions absent that information, and hopefully we can change it later if we get that piece of information back and it tells us something else. Like, that's a really tough spot to be in. So the pain that people really feel is, it's less about the tools that they're using. It's less about the work that they do and the things they have to accomplish, should say, and more about the work that's done to get there. They're pressured to make better decisions faster, and nobody cares at the end of the day how you get there, as long as you get there quickly and you can iterate on it.
So Matt, I know, that we're sensing a lot of pressure, right? I think all three of us are sensing a lot of pressure for change, but this industry has been slow, right? They've been a little bit of a laggard in many regards. And I've had conversations, because I've worked inside of big oil. I know that, the fuel space was the one that was got the last bit of money. They'd rather spend it, upstream or some other place that had higher margin business, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of this is making up time for that. But is there other things that you've noticed? Because you've worked across multiple different industries as well. Mm-hmm. You've been focusing on this just for a little bit now, but what are you seeing that has been a major barrier to adoption that people ought to watch out for? So,
well, so whether it's from my recent experience at DTN or before that, even in this industry, and then thinking about it in other industries, I looked at two things. One are what are the external catalysts, right? And there are some that affect more than just the refined fuel space. I mean, industry consolidation. There are major systems changes mandates that are going on out there. In the ERP space, that's one of them, but there are more. There's also what we talked about earlier, changing expectations from employees, partners, customers that are just driven by their own personal experiences. How can it be so easy to make a decision in your personal life about where to invest, where not to, what information is available to you to support making that decision, and how do you follow the results of it? Whereas businesses that depend on you to make those decisions, it's much more difficult to do that, it seems. But those people that are in the seats, they want the opportunity to have that same experience. And David mentioned talent earlier. That's a common thread, right? There's generational change in a lot of these areas that, frankly, you can't rely on that institutional knowledge, that tacit knowledge. But I think the big change that is the other side of it. So you have those external forces, but it used to be that in order to take advantage of it, you had to do some big bang. You had to do something massive and impactful to the operation of the business in order to get the results from that type of investment. And there are now ways that you can do that actually respects the very risk management centric culture and attitude of this industry. It respects the complexities of it. Things like implementing integration capabilities across systems no longer is as scary as it used to be. People used to be very, very afraid of things breaking. Now there are ways to do it in a really resilient way, to test it thoroughly, and even do so with sort of parallel activities that allow the business operations to continue. We've really worked through not only the technology side, but the operational process of taking advantage of this new stuff. And finally, not to brag too much about DTN, like I've only been here a little bit of time now, but I think the other thing is solutions used to be very generic. And DTN offers a really context-centric and smart way to enable these types of capabilities. And now that there's a way to take advantage of them in a really specific way that's tailored to the way these companies make decisions and execute their business, you tie it together with those other two themes that I mentioned, and the timing is right, where it may not have been in the past.
Well, technology certainly changed, and you mentioned a couple of things there that's fascinating, because I'm always torn between this big scary transformation topic on one end of the spectrum that sort of implies massive wholesale change in the organization, to where how do we get that rapid innovation and learning cycle right within the company. But
transformation is a process, not an event. Right.
That's a good way to think about it, right? Is people shouldn't get hung up on that. It's more of painting a bold new vision and destination that, yes, we can map out a path, right, that says here's how you can get there in a systemic and sustainable way, right? That's the other part of it. And I think we've talked about that, so technology is reshaping, pricing, supply, dispatch, allocations. And I think as I look at all those different functions, those all have historically been very isolated functions, right, that weren't fully integrated. And but I think let's shift a little bit now to how do we balance that rapid innovation, reliability, and safety that we know is paramount for this industry. So David, I'm going to come back to you. If you imagine now, take a step back and kind of project forward that we're fully connected, fully digital empowered, refined fuels ecosystem in 2026. What does that look like, and what becomes possible that wasn't before?
I think people get tired of hearing me say it, but three things become possible. Revenue and profit, efficiency, and risk mitigation. So, because that's all that really matters, is I think when you dumb it all down, right? So, the fear, I don't remember exactly the words you used, Matt, but transformation is a journey. It's a marathon. Likewise with innovation, and it's not a big bang project, right? So in this industry, very risk adverse, very like Ken, you said, margins are thin, in the downstream space, and it is, right? So that's another risk, right? I can't give up the thin margin that I have. But I want to create all these efficiencies with all this new technology. So, I think it's important. You have to remember that innovation or transformation is reliability, and that's the way you have to look at it. So, if a tool makes you faster, but it increases risk, or a quality issue, or a safety incident, it's not innovation; it's a liability, right? So, practically, I think there's a couple of things you got to pay attention to, right? So you start by hardening operational backbone, right? Data quality, system resilience, clear audit trails. If you've been doing this for a while, every company says, gee, I can't wait to get me some of that innovation. And then you show up and you do a little consulting work and you say, that's great, but we've got a 2-year master data management problem that we've got to resolve first. And suddenly innovation doesn't look that important anymore. So got to clean up the data, right? Got to make the systems resilient. Because if you don't trust the underlying data and the processes, you're not going to trust any AI recommendations that come out of them, right? So I think also when you introduce that innovation in a controlled slices of the business, I think you mentioned this, Matt, not a big bang. We can't flip a switch across an entire network. We got to pick a region. We got to pick a product set. We got to pick a workflow, whatever. But, pick a spot where you want to make an improvement that can be measured and prove that the new way is better than the old way. And then at least I've created something that's a repeatable process, right? And don't make the mistake of making this an IT project. You got to keep all the operators in the loop, right? So the best systems don't replace human judgment, they amplify it, right? So when schedulers and traders and terminal teams help shape and validate the tools, you're going to get a better outcome and a much stronger adoption in the long run.
Yeah, I love that. As far as the things I think about are what's possible, right? I remember having a conversation this the last couple months that people talk about that and I think David or Matt, you mentioned this earlier. People spend all their time just gathering data to get a perspective of, do I feel comfortable enough now to make this one decision, right? But the reality is there's multiple decisions happening all the time. And I remember sharing with an executive, I said, what would it be like if every day when your people walked in, they log in at, that's 7 a.m., 8 a.m., whatever the time is, by, 5 minutes into it, they already had the first decision available to them that they could then tee up and say, hey, this is something you ought to look at, the technology is actually recommending it. And oh, by the way, here's the 2 or 3 options you should consider, to look at, simulate that, and then make a decision, then move on to the next one. I mean, what kind of power would that unlock, right? I think about from my old days of operations to where being able to make multiple decisions a day like that. There's this concept of a digital abundance that I heard a thought leader talk about a few years ago, right? That, by having that visibility, now all of a sudden you're not, you have enough inventory, you have enough transportation, you have enough drivers, all these things, David, we've heard over the last, years, those all become capacity constraints in the supply chain, right? So let's pivot a little bit to talk about, so how do we turn a vision, right, into reality here? So, we talked about that, but execution still remains the hard part. And, so what's the key to turning that digital transformation from a concept into real measurable impact? So Matt, what have you seen has been the real?
Well, we hit on it a little bit earlier, but we didn't say it as directly. But I think everybody on this call and probably listening to this podcast has heard the phrase don't eat the entire elephant at once. I mean, we said it in a different way. We've all heard it before, and it's absolutely true. Now, the exciting thing is, and others in various spaces have all sort of embraced the notion that you don't have to, and our solutions were conceived to allow eating a bite of the elephant at a time. So, you think about FOH, Fuel Operations Hub, covers a tremendous amount of supply chain decision support capability, right? But it's not a big bang. You do what David suggested. You pick off those things that are going to make a measurable difference that really fall in your priority list, and you focus them. You pick off 1, 2, however, 3 at a time, and you focus in on those and deploy them. You execute it. You build your business case by having success with it, and you build that repetitive motion machine. But you can plan out that phasing in such a way that helps you deliver continuous value, as opposed to, okay, I'm going to wait a year now and see what I get at the end, and then we'll maybe think about it at the end. It's an ongoing exercise. It's defined, it's achievable, it allows for focus, it delivers value along the way. Like, that's how you turn it into reality. And I think if you want to drill it down a step further, there's how do you make the technology work, right? Which is, once you've done all those things to prioritize and sort of plan what you're going to attack, how do you make the technology work? But then how do you make the people successful? And if you attend to both of those things, you can accomplish some pretty amazing things and go from what is, and David used this in a conversation with me previously, which I thought was great. There's an interdependency across systems and processes within our customers' businesses, but the interconnectedness is missing, right? And so address the gap in interconnectedness to make those interdependencies something that is just part of the connective tissue in the tooling that's used to make decisions and operate the business, as opposed to something that creates barriers in it. And I think doing it in that sort of very straightforward, prioritized, phased way is how you make it reality. We've seen success with it, and others have. I don't think there's a silver bullet. It really is that simple.
Yeah, fine. And what I love what you said is that can be a little bit of a unique path for each customer, right? At least the starting point, right? Is what's their most relevant pain point and what's of most value to them, to that perspective. So David, anything to add to that you can think of that?
Sure. You know me, I can talk. So
clearly I can too.
I think like Matt said, right? It's pick something that is measurable that you want to achieve. I like to say specific and actionable. And let's go achieve that. I think the tools that y'all are developing focus in that space, but if I was on the other side of the coin as a customer, I'd say, all right, we've picked these 3 things that we want to achieve. Show me. Let's achieve those. And I want to reduce unplanned runouts by 40%. I want to quit reworking loads at the rack. I want to cut that in half. Okay, those are concrete goals. Let's go see if we can achieve them with these new tools and new processes, right? And then measure it and see where you get, right? So if you can't baseline performance against a redesigned workflow, when you introduce a tool or something, we're just putting window dressings up, right? I've got to show a scheduler, a trader, and a CFO that something improved in their world. Right? It just doesn't matter how fancy the technology is.
Yeah, you got it very clear what's that before versus after. And I think you're sort of picking at that I know we've talked about it a lot, and you've done a lot of these in your career, building those business cases and have absolute clarity on what is that what do we at least think that business case is going to be? Get agreement, alignment on it, and make sure that, working with people like Matt to deliver on that case, right? To make sure that, hey, are we actually achieving this? We're not done until we're done, sort of aspect, delivering that. So I love that sort of value focused and
There's
coming
two
up with a
things,
roadmap. So yeah.
that I continually see. One, we ignore the data, right? There's a lot of crap data out there, and it needs to be cleaned up, right? So let's look at the processes that produce the data and everything else. Let's figure out, technology's there now. We can create semantic models across all this stuff and normalize all this data across numerous systems. And that's just got to happen before we can trust the data to make good operational decisions, right? And the second thing is really nobody measures anything. They don't. We have a big transformational program, but we don't know if it was any better than it was previously because we did not take a baseline and we did not measure. And just take the time to put that structure and rigor in place in order to make it happen. Another one of my colloquial sayings, right? If you can't go fast without guardrails. Right. So put up the guardrails, put the structure and rigor around the process, and let's bounce off the guardrails and measure this thing, and then we'll be able to go fast the next time we do it, and becomes a repeatable process that achieves, right?
Well, you kind of mentioned a couple things there, so let's dive a little bit in the specific technology, right, itself. What tools, platforms, capabilities are driving that meaningful transformation, and yes, I'm like you. I sort of cringe a little bit when I hear, we got to clean up the data because, I was recruited for many years to be part of standards boards and other things. And I told them about 10 years ago, I said, technology's moved on that, right? It's the standards. And it's like now you just need a platform. But David, what are you seeing? What are the specific tools? Just kind of dig into that a little bit more. So.
You said something, one of my pet peeves, you standards, plural. There's no plural. That's the problem. And so you're right.
You're right. That is the problem.
And nobody can agree what the standard is. So, okay, well, we can fix that with technology, right? Because, if I can't make businesses and business people and business processes collaborative in the way that they need to be, I can use technology to make that happen. So, new tech, and it's not new. It's new to this industry, right? So, integrated operation platforms, right, that sit across the whole refined fuel value chain. We've been doing integrated operations in upstream for 30 years. And now, the refined fuel space is starting to kind of break down those silos, and we're starting to integrate, across all these operational silos, and that's fantastic. We'll be able to make tremendous improvements in that value chain. The phrase we used to use in the upstream was interconnected, interoperable, and intelligent, and I think that's exactly where we are now in the downstream, right? So interconnected, interoperable, and intelligence. That's what we're building. That's what this is about. So instead of a dozen point solutions that don't talk to each other, more and more companies are starting to use platforms to tie it all together. And that forecasting, supply, scheduling, dispatch, pricing, all those decisions visible to each other down that decision chain as well. And then putting advanced analytics and optimization on top of it as well. So seeing real use of AI, machine learning, improving demand forecasting, suggesting optimal sourcing, routing, risking, highlighting risks that might be there, but looking at the whole value chain, which, quite frankly, many parts of it you were blind to. I tell people that, a terminal is a warehouse, and the terminal operator has product, and a truck shows up and takes product, and quite frankly, the terminal operator did not know he was coming. Would you operate a warehouse that way? That's the way this business runs. So I think we're breaking that down. And the third thing, of course, data integration and IoT, which we've talked about, right? From the pipeline to the terminal to carrier status, carrier capacities, weather, traffic, all the way down to the forecourt in that tank. All of that integration, all the integrated operations across that, I think we're not too far away from changing the monthly plan at the refinery with demand downstream that isn't in a spreadsheet, because this is the way it's always been in October when the weather's like this. We'll get real live information in order to set those boundaries up and do that. So
yeah,
all that's
become
possible.
even more critical. Going to become
Cloud,
even more critical.
APIs, that's what's making this all work. It's
Yep.
We're in a unique place where all this has come together, and all we have to do is go out and make it happen. Right? It's very exciting.
Well, so and I think though to that point, like the very first thing you mentioned, which is like an integrated operations platform, I think oftentimes companies I've worked with, they're used to a heterogeneous mix of systems and tools. And there's going to be a heterogeneous mix of systems and tools that you're going to leverage. But I think having an integrated operations platform takes on a particular importance in a continuous process business versus a discrete manufacturing type of business, as an example. The connective tissue that needs to be there between a pricing decision for the rack today and how that connects into the rest of the value chain is very different. And the timeliness of the impact of said decision is very different than whether or not we change the shelf price for Twinkies, right? There's a meaningful difference in the impact of those types of decisions and how they cascade across an operation. And so having it connected in one place takes on, I think, special power.
I agree.
Yeah, so so what are the most common pain points customers want to solve then? We've talked a little bit about what are those, I guess maybe what are those first bites that you're starting to see, Matt, that customers are really starting to prioritize, and how can the tools finally address them that like they weren't before? So
well, I think David talked about it earlier, and you can't avoid it. You characterized it as firefighting, David, but frankly, it's the way that folks operate today. The fact that to make the decisions of the day requires you gather all the information over the course of the day, and then you have a stand up to sort of cement everybody's understanding, hurry up and make decisions, and then wait till the next morning to recycle again. Everything is in some respects a daily firefight. And so the things that I've heard today to, where do people want to tackle things first? It's addressing that. It's about the ability to work different there and not have to do it that way, or if they're going to do it that way, have the information more readily available so they can come in more prepared is the first step. And so that's, what is the pricing decision going to be? What allocations may need to change? Very much things related to the sales and marketing, supply and trading offerings that are there first. And I think it's smart the way that FOH is being rolled out, capability by capability, module by module, very much matches with those priorities that we've been hearing from our customers through co-innovation. I mean, it's not two things that are disconnected. They're very much intertwined.
okay.
I would dumb that down, because I'm not too smart, into the biggest pain point is reacting as opposed to responding. That's what we do. Firefighting, call it what you want. We're very reactionary to stuff, as opposed to being able to respond to it, right? If I could, responding, taking into account all of the inputs and being able to make an intelligent decision about it is more of a response as opposed to a reaction. Runouts, late trucks, allocation surprises, weather, hurricanes, margins, it's just madness. So, and we're always constantly reacting. And why are we doing that? If I've got the data and if I can apply the tools to the data, I've got insight into all this long before I have to react. I'm making intelligent decisions prior to them becoming a challenging decision, right? I don't have to go change commercial strategies. I'm actually, optimizing, in not in real time, but as part of the business as it moves and as impacts are being applied to the business and everything else. So it's very, I just dumb it down into that, right? And what allows you to respond as opposed to react? Digital workflows, right? It's having, if I've got insight into everything, of course, integrated, interoperable, and intelligent, suddenly I'm at ease, right? Because I've got a view into everything, and the machine is giving me a view into everything, and the machine isn't just showing it to me on a screen. The machine is coming up and saying, hey, there's a boogeyman going to happen at 6 o'clock on Friday morning, and it looks like this. And here's some options for you. Well, that's exactly what I want. If I could come into a daily report every morning and say, and then, in a refinery or a manufacturing organization, that's, you got a logbook, right? The guy comes in and says, okay, what broke last night? What do we need to look at today? Blah, blah, blah. So they can plan. I think in the secondary distribution space now, any operator, even a CFO or a CEO could come in, pull up one screen that says, hey, this is what's going on. This is your position on your fuels. This is your position on your sales. This is what traffic looks like. This is what it looks like going forward. And here's your pipeline allocations that are coming in. And here's a couple of places where we might have a little congestion. And here's some here's some decisions we're making. That's what a wonderful place. It's like being married. All the decisions are made for you.
Okay. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of rapid fire questions here just so we can close out things. It's been a great conversation, but Matt, what's the one technology, and let's keep it really short. What's the one technology will be mainstream by 2028?
Well, some would say it's already here, but it's not necessarily here for every business, and that's AI-assisted decision support. And not the sci-fi nightmare, the coming alive, but practical, focused solutions that tie data, context, your context, into good recommendations, actions, and even automation of routine decisions. It's there for some, but it's not there for everybody. But by 2028, I think it'll be critical mass.
Okay. David, anything?
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you've been under a rock the last 3 years, you haven't seen how quickly this thing is accelerated.
Okay.
It's in everything. So it'll be everywhere.
Okay, so David, if you say that's not a surprise, but what is there something you do think will surprise people the most in the next 2 years?
Well, I just touched on, I think, adoption, right? This is going to move really, really fast. Something else I like to say, right? This is an incestuous business. We all know each other. We all talk. We all watch what the other company's doing. And I think as adoption takes place around, these new tools, these new capabilities, and competitors, revenue goes up, efficiencies go up, risks are mitigated. Everybody looks at it and says, that's become top of mind now. We can't be left behind. We've got to get in front of this, or we will be left behind.
Yeah, I think I know myself, when I think about next 2 years, I can imagine that most of the the marketing executives today are going to be walking in. They're going to have a digital assistant either while they're walking in to the office in the morning, so listen, their podcast can be sitting there telling them, predicting forums like, hey, here's what the issues are, right? The agents will be out there. Here's what the issues are that are happening in your specific market. And here's what I would, here's the things I'd recommend you to do, sort of 1, 2, and 3 that you look at. I think people will be surprised by that, but it's coming. So where will the early adopters gain the biggest competitive advantage then? So Matt, where do you think that is?
So using the firefighting term, I think the biggest competitive advantage is going to come from some small things en masse, right? It's customers, employees, partner experience are going to be impacted significantly every step along the way, and those come together to form big results. I think from a operational resiliency perspective, it's also going to be really impactful. So think about, if you can eliminate all the small fires, or the vast majority of the small fires, or that reactive decision making that you referenced, David, as opposed to responsive, think about how much your ability to plan for the bigger shocks becomes, right? So thinking about a full circle to the risk mitigation topic earlier, like in a risk management culture, if you're not fighting through the thicket every day, and you can focus on how to make your business more resilient and scalable,
Yep.
up and down, like, it's tremendous impact.
Yeah, I think that's a great one, right? That the resilience, that's what I was thinking about, is wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be shocking? And, David, where you live down in there in Hurricane Alley, wouldn't it be nice to be shocked that, hey, the next hurricane that comes ashore, people already know, right, how to respond, what's going to happen. And, it's be able to get resilience much more quickly. So
I think, simply put, early adopters get to turn volatility into opportunity. That's
there
it.
you go.
Right.
No,
There's a boatload of volatility. Sometimes, well, everybody in the supply chain is creating volatility for you, and you're complaining about it every single day, including the weather.
Yeah.
So, if I've got insights into that stuff, I can make hay out of it, right? It's a good opportunity if I've got the information and the ability to react on it.
that's awesome. So, hey, final question. For companies who want to prepare for what's coming next, what's the single best advice you'd offer to them, Matt?
This one's easy for me, because it's something that I had to take to heart as soon as I came in the virtual walls of DTN not too long ago, which is, throw out your assumptions about what is possible, and what's required to do something. Think about it as truly white space, because the capabilities are there today to really actually enable that in a way that is fundamentally different than just not too long ago. And I think being anchored to those assumptions that you may have formed over time, or your company may have formed over time, that's how we do it, that's how we're going to do it. I think it's going to be a very leaden anchor for those who don't throw out those assumptions.
David?
Yeah. How many years ago would you have ever thought Uber existed, or Airbnb? I mean, you changed the business model. If you had a magic wand, what would you do different, right? So, taking all those assumptions, not even assumptions, there is no whiteboard, there is no box to think outside of, just how would you do this different, right? And so, with that said, again, not a big bang thing. Pick a spot where a high value decision takes place in your business, and use that as a digital proving ground. Start there, and measure it, and from there, I think you're going to figure out, what's your next layer of advancement that you're going to do for your business. Not best in class, but next in class. Completely different, game changing. And there's some leaders out there in this space that are doing these things, right? And pay attention.
Yeah.
They're leading, without a doubt.
Think big,
Yeah,
act small, do it fast, learn.
Yeah,
repeat.
agile.
Yeah.
Agile. Right. Hey, well, listen, this has been a great conversation, and hopefully for those of you that are listening on this, we've given you a few things to take away. But if anything I would leave you with is that, for the longest time, everybody always talked about, well, if only this, if only that, if we could do that. I think what I would tell you from my position is, I think the future is now. I mean, it's here, it's ready. Things are, going to break open in a big way. And my advice to you would be, just sort of building on what Matt and David said, was that you need to get moving, right? You need to get on the train and get moving, because or else you're going to get left behind, right? And you'd much rather use this digital tools as a capability is going to help you sustain and grow your business. Because more than anything in this space, we are the industry. The fuels industry is what keeps America moving, right? And so we need to take leadership in that and expect that. Now, a couple things come forward. Just Matt and David, I really appreciate you guys' time. I love working with you guys on a daily and weekly basis to be able to help bring forth some of this vision. And just to preview a little bit what's coming forward, we got a couple of different topics we're teed up to where we're going to talk about the importance of education. In this, I'm going to have Scott Berhang from Sigma, one of our future topics, talk about, the need for education, particularly to attract new young people coming into this industry, right? It hasn't always been the industry of choice for new talent coming in. And then, of course, one of the topics that we sort of touched on a little bit, but we've had a lot of conversation around that terminal to carrier interface or lack thereof. And so Drew Stipa, who's the founder of Tandem Concepts, who recently joined DTN, is going to join me on a future episode. So with that, thank you. Until next time, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all.